A couple of things that I would like. My name is Bert Borgman. I'm an assistant commissioner with the association, and we'll be kind of moving through this with this press conference. We will hear from CHSAA Commissioner Rhonda Blanford Green, and we also have CHSAA Assistant Commissioner Adam Bright, who handles football, on with us as well. One of the things that I would like to start off with, though, is to kind of go through some of the basic rules, so to speak, that we need to have for this conference. If you would, please be courteous to the person who is asking the question. Please keep your microphone muted until you're called upon. Use the hand raising function to be called upon. Either Ryan Casey or myself will call upon you so that you can address the question to the appropriate person. On the season list, if you're looking for the specific sports in those seasons, please reference chsanow.com. That they're up there on that post right now. And when you ask a question, would you please announce your name and your media affiliation so that we have that for the record and we are recording this to our YouTube channel. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Rhonda Blanford Green.
Good afternoon. As you can imagine, it's been a whirlwind from my meeting with the governor this morning, but it's actually been a whirlwind since March when high school athletics and activities across the nation were hit with the COVID-19 pandemic, and decisions were being made regarding basketball, and that has trickled down through the spring. And even with some of the communication and guidelines that were recommended by CHSAA beginning June 1st until today, when we've made the decision on the rest of our 26 athletics and activities, because we have done an introduction and a resumption of, first of all, boys golf. And then last week, with approval from the State Department, we were able on Wednesday during the All School Summit to introduce girls softball as well as boys tennis. And so today was really truly a culminating conversation around some safety concerns that they may have had. It's also not more, first and foremost, it's about making sure that the resumption of high school athletics and activities aligned with the educational guidelines that have been laid out for 360 public, private, and charter schools that participate. And so there was a lot of conversation, not around what's been going on in the summer, not what's been going on XYZ. It's about, are we connected to the educational guidelines that are out there by the Department of Education, and also looking at some of the data points and medical points from our State Department, our Colorado Department of Health, as well as our Colorado Department of Education. And so, you know, everything's not ideal. Anytime you go outside of the norm, it's not ideal, right? We're a 100-year-old association. We've been, our norms are set for us, our seasons are set for us, our dates are set for us. But at the end of the day, we're in a pandemic, and we're charged with creating opportunities for our kids within the state guidelines and the educational guidelines. So I'm going to leave it there. And I really, truly want this to be interactive. That's what Zooms tend to do, is somebody's a talking head and then everybody just listens, but that's not, if you know me, that's not how I operate. And so I would much rather respond to your questions than to have some, you know, laid out plan and whatever you may want. I really, truly want this to be about me having a conversation with our media partners and providing you some clarification. I want to thank, first and foremost, I want to thank the state officials, and I do want to thank the Colorado Department of Health. We talked through many things, and I really felt gratitude to have a voice at the table, because that's not what's happening across the nation. We have governors making decisions about where high school athletics and activities will be based upon the cohorts that are in the State Department, and they don't reach out to their state organizations. And we've had governors, as you know, because you follow athletics, that come out with press releases. And if you could see this, the state office face, it would be like, where'd that come from? I am very grateful that we were able to collaborate with the different state agencies. I am glad we were able to advocate and get some of the things that we wanted that probably weren't going to happen. And so with that said, I want to thank them, but I also want to thank the CHSAA staff. This CHSAA staff has been 24/7 responding to concerns, creating alternative plans. Because when we went originally, it was everything we were asking for all sports in their traditional seasons, right? We were asking for an increase in capacity limits. And we were also asking for an increase in rosters, because there are certain sports that we could not conduct this fall under the state guidelines, not CHSAA guidelines, the state guidelines. And so when we saw a resurgence in our state, we had to come up with plan B. We had to come up with plan C. We had to resubmit. And so where we are today, we feel very good about the ability to not have disruptions, to not have cancellations, and to try to give every kid in the state of Colorado the opportunity to participate in a sport and in a season that they love. So I'll open it up for conversation. Any questions?
Rhonda, Jake Gaden from Colorado Springs has a question.
Hi, Rhonda. Good seeing you again. And I'm excited to see that the football or the whole high school seasons are going to be starting soon. Specifically for football, my question is this. This moving it to the springtime is going to affect recruiting a bunch with these high school kids, especially kids that have already committed and were planning on enrolling early, or kids that have not yet to be recruited and were relying on tape their senior year to possibly get recruited. And now that it starts in February, that kind of shakes a lot of things up. So what would you say to those kids that are now put in a difficult spot and really don't have the same abilities that they would have in previous years?
Yes, I would say that I think we're all, after 20 weeks of being part of the pandemic and having to make choices and having to try to make the best decisions for the majority of student athletes, right? I think this was a much harder question to answer when we canceled the basketball tournament 2 days before the finals, right? We didn't know what we were facing. Our kids were blindsided. We were blindsided. I think 20 weeks into what we've had to all as citizens, as coaches, as participants, that we were fighting for the opportunity to give football a season, right? Everybody isn't looking for a recruitment tape. Go to Holly, go to Springfield, go to the majority of the schools that they just were like, you got to fight for us to have a season. And when we heard that the different health groups and county health groups weren't looking at any contact sports, we had to go to plan B and start advocating for some type of season for our kids to have football their senior year, their junior year. So a long answer to your question is our focus was on giving our kids opportunities across the state. And however, our different, there's 11 states right now in the same predicament as us. There's a bunch that are saying they're going to start football this fall. I haven't seen it yet. I think that the pandemic determines whether or not those are going to happen. And some of those are in hotspots right now, right? So we can keep pushing back those dates, and there's that hope there, because I had it during the spring, right? But I'm just glad we were able to allow and make decisions that everybody can plan around for all 29 activities in athletics.
Thanks, Ron.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Jake. Austin White.
Thanks, Bert. Rhonda, it's Austin White can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure. Austin White with the Pueblo Chieftain. My question was about, how much, looking at this model, I think I saw a similar one in Washington. What kind of finally led you guys to kind of make this new season or this new slot and kind of increase the whole calendar through June?
Okay, so you guys know me to be pretty direct and honest. I can tell you that a quadrant season was on the whiteboard prior to the resurgence, because when our staff went to early June, right after the task force, right? We put together a traditional season starting on time. And then we spent another probably 2 or 3 days saying, what are our contingency plans? So what happens if we have to shut down? What happens if there's a cancellation? What happens if schools don't, if they shut down and say no athletics and activities? So this plan that you're seeing right now was actually already on the whiteboard in June. And then we've just had to tweak it as we've been asked to make some revisions or whatever. So I'm really proud of our staff. And what makes me happy is when I saw that, I mean, this was a contingency plan. We didn't even submit this to the state because at the time, Colorado was in, you guys, if you read the paper, Colorado has this. Colorado has met, flatten the curve. And so we felt really optimistic that we were going to be able to start with all athletics on time in their traditional seasons. And then we just had a bunch of contingency plans. Okay, what does this look like if we have the second wave and we have to shut down for 2 weeks? What does it look like if we have an outbreak at a school? So we had so many different plans on the table. So again, with Washington, New Mexico, about 11 states that have a similar the right, because we had not put that out in the public yet. But when we saw these plans, we're like, whoa, we're moving in the right direction. Should we not be given able to dictate our course and our culminating events on our terms? And so that's what was approved today.
All
Thanks, Rob.
right, can we move on to Heart of the Rockies?
Yeah, this is Caleb Bergraff over at Heart of the Rockies Radio in Salida. I was just talking on kind of the moving of sports around a little bit. I noticed baseball, girls golf did not get moved up, even though they played in the summer. Girls golf, obviously, boys golf getting going. What was the reasoning behind leaving those two where they're at instead of moving those into the fall, like moving those into the fall?
Yeah, there was not really any consideration to pick up sports that are not traditionally played in a season and force them to play outside of their non-traditional season if we were given the opportunity to create this calendar. So we weren't looking to take baseball and put it in the spring when it normally plays in its traditional season. So really the only sports that were placed in the additional quadrant were sports that we were told could not participate in the fall. So everything else is kind of aligned with where you normally play that sport. It also protected our rural schools and small schools. The transition from one season A to season D, it aligns with what would happen in a 3-season sport if you made it to the postseason playoffs, right? So yeah, we weren't looking to, and no state association has done that. We were reading on Twitter and social media that, oh, Ohio was going to move spring sports to the fall and fall sports to the spring. Louisiana was doing that. Every one of their board of directors shot down that idea. There's not one state that I know of at this point, with all of the plans that have been released, that spring sports were placed in the fall and fall sports were placed in the spring. So I don't want to, I just haven't seen that yet. So I guess it just doesn't make sense. If you have the ability to conduct sports near their traditional seasons, other than when you were told that they could not participate, you want to replicate and mimic as close to the normal schedule as you have and our kids have played.
Thank you, Rhonda. Hart?
Hi, Rhonda. This is Hart Pisani with the Sterling Journal Advocate. First and foremost, thanks for being here with us today and for all the work you've done the past few months. My question was about that moratorium schedule from October to January where there won't be sports played. Was that in that initial whiteboard plan that you had discussed, or was the state Did they inform you, look, from this period, we just don't think it would be safest to do that? How did that moratorium kind of come up into the plan?
Okay, so the more, obviously, we had some sports that we wanted for the fall season, right? And so the moratorium evolved after we knew that certain sports potentially wouldn't have the opportunity to go past October or November. So it didn't make sense to start another sport. Plus, if you look at the medical data, you look at all the data points from the Colorado for right a second wave, and schools potentially would shut down and go to completely remote. So it just made sense to not be where we were in the spring, just waiting, right? If we know that there's a potential, why start another sport? Give ourselves that break, give our schools that break, and then resume. The original plan, I keep saying this, was traditional sports and their traditional seasons, no moratorium, but we knew that potentially we would have some disruptions and that we could potentially have some cancellations. So we got in front of that. So this plan has contingencies. It has types of resurgence with COVID, as well as trying to protect our seasons so that our kids have playoff and culminating events without cancellations or disruptions. And I think we have a better chance after January than what we're seeing in October.
All right, Connor McHugh.
Hi there. This is Connor McHugh with CBS4. My question is about overlapping sports seasons. I noticed that with football now in this new quadrant, it overlaps with sports like wrestling and part of the baseball season. What does this mean for multi-sport athletes who still want to play a couple of them?
It's no different than our traditional seasons. We always, if you make it to playoffs, you're going to have some overlap. So this isn't any different. This calendar doesn't change that whenever you make it to playoffs, your sport extends into the next season. So those kids won't have to make a choice about whether or not they participate. They will be celebrating and being in season B in the playoffs, and then they'll go right into the next. I actually just talked to a football coach about that. And he said, Rhonda, what about if our kids make it to the playoffs and then football starts at this time? And I said, no different than when you made it to the Mile High Stadium and your basketball kids didn't transition to basketball, or your football kids didn't transition to basketball until after the state championship. So there's no changes in the transition. Team is lucky enough to get into the playoffs and the culminating state event.
All right, Kyle Newman.
Hey, Ron, that's Kyle Newman from the Denver Post.
Hi, Kyle.
So with the season D, obviously there's graduations in May, and club ball is an issue, especially for baseball. Do you foresee any issues, and how will eligibility work, for that season D, especially after people graduate and they're still playing?
Okay, so two things. We already conduct state championships, especially the state track meet, when 25 to 30% of our schools have already conducted graduation. And now that we've extended the baseball season into early June, graduations and kids have already completed their season. So there are absolutely no issues. We've already had golf and some of our fall sports that have in the past that has started before the traditional calendar of schools. So our past precedent is that we've conducted athletics and activities of our schools. And I think the other question that you asked me was, do I foresee that there will be issues? And I just want to remind everyone, 20 weeks ago, we had to shut down spring sports. And those athletes and those schools would have done anything to have this opportunity. So if someone tries to create drama or issues around getting our kids back on, we as adults can't find a way to make this happen for them, then I don't know where we would be. I think that what ifs are so minute compared to the fact that we're moving forward and we're getting our kids back into athletics and activities. All the other stuff is minor. Like I told someone, we don't even have sites yet for some of our sports. We just made this decision today. We didn't know what the State Department was going to do. So we have a lot of TBDs, but I can tell you this, knowing that we've been given this opportunity to now have playoffs and culminating events in a way to for what we know will be the culminating event for each high school. So not playing the what if game, because what if we shut down? What if we're back in spring and our kids aren't even given an opportunity? And I think that this gives us hope to think that we can build something around what we've been given at this.
Thanks, Ron.
All righty, Rod Mackey, please.
Rhonda, first of all, thanks for all the work that you and everyone at Chess has put into this. Schedule on paper looks great. You just said we're not going to play what if, but I got to do a quick what if. Let's say take basketball or wrestling as an example. If the pandemic is bad during that time, would there be a chance that you would take a sport and perhaps push it to later when like lacrosse season or something else is going? Will you, if the sport is supposed to start on February 22nd, would you be willing to push it back? Or if you miss what that deadline is now, does that mean that sport's going to be eliminated?
Yeah, no. You know what? I tell everybody I learned in March, right? Never to say never. When I said, oh, we'd never have basketball without fans. And 2 weeks later, COVID made me eat my words, right? The beauty of what this calendar does is it allows us flexibility to work around potentially some of the concerns that we weren't allowed to do this spring, right? We didn't have a chance to extend this season. We didn't have it when schools shut down athletics and activities. So the answer to your question is yes. I feel like we have more flexibility within a 7-month calendar to give our kids an opportunity. Now, would they all have culminating state events? That's something that we would have to look at the circumstances at that time, but at least now we have time to plan. We're not reacting. We have opportunities for a disruption if something were to happen. And I just feel better about where we're at with this starting point than I did when we were coming off of March and April, and there just wasn't any opportunity to even say we can plan around something because our schools were shut down and we were shut down. So yes, my answer to your question definitively is I feel like we have enough space and time to at least provide some level of opportunity for our kids. But if the state shuts down, it's not like CHSAA is going to be able to operate. So I want to say it depends on what the decisions are at the state, but I feel more optimistic about where we would be than I would this fall.
All right, Jeff Latofsky.
Hi guys, Rhonda, Bert, Ryan. Appreciate all you guys do, man. This has been awesome what you've done and to get to this point. I just had a general question on maybe the protocols and procedures that are in place. Or are you following the health guidelines if a player or a student athlete or a coach comes down with COVID? Are you following maybe what the MLB or NBA or what they're doing? Just to have something in place for that.
Yes, and you know what I was trying to find, and I'm sorry, I don't know what I did with it, but we absolutely have provided our schools with the CHSAA COVID-19 guidelines. They've been vetted by multiple levels of medical groups, including the National Federation of High School and State High School guidelines were integrated into that through their sports medicine. And yes, our schools have to follow CDC. They have to follow Colorado Department of Health. And on top of that, they also have to make sure that they're following their county health departments. So when plans were being put into place, and I say this, we had to work with 53 county health departments, right? because we are a statewide organization. We can't operate in this bubble. We have to be able to provide opportunities for the areas of our states that maybe have low cases, as well as we provide opportunities for those that are in hotspots, right? So our guidelines were a combination of getting resources and medical data to create our CHSAA health and safety guidelines. Those are posted on our website on under the SMAC committee, which is the Colorado Sports Medicine Advisory Committee, CHSAA Advisory Committee. And then and I don't know what other agencies are doing this because we always get compared to rec, club, or youth, but I can tell you interscholastic high school athletics and activities have conducted numerous outreach. We've been with the Colorado High School Coaches Association. We had an all-school summit, and we went over the specific guidelines and expectations. And I think different from other organizations that cause a lot of confusion out there, the things that were most important about keeping our kids, officials, and coaches safe were not just recommendations. They were our requirements, and they are guidelines to make sure that CHSAA events, whether at the local level or the state level, are consistent across the state for expectations for keeping our kids safe as they participate.
And Jeff, you can find some of those on under our SMAC tab on chsanow.com.
Thank you.
That you're going to see
Yes,
there.
thanks, Jeff.